Call of Duty has always been one of my favorite guilty pleasures. While I consider a few other games in the FPS space to have stronger game design that offers a more nuanced and engaging experience, I always find myself having a good time with Call of Duty if I feel like getting some low effort dopamine hits. This is really bizarre because it almost seems like no one that mains Call of Duty seems to be having fun with it. Droves of YouTube content creators making their living making COD hate videos. Every other comment section of COD videos consists of walls of negativity and complaint, most of them revolving around one thing: SBMM, aka skill-based matchmaking. As someone who used to frequent these online communities on Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter, I've grown pretty tired of this discourse due to the sheer amount of ignorance and misinformation. SBMM killed my dog. SBMM fucked my wife. SBMM kicked me in the fucking balls. It's so fucking stupid. Almost no one who talks about SBMM knows exactly how it works, and people repeatedly misquote or misinterpret the actual tested data from those diligent enough to actually test the matchmaking system of these games. I know I'm a mere raindrop against a tidal wave, but there needs to be some sort of pushback against the raw stupidity and misinformation that has taken over the community for games I enjoy. So I'm doing my due diligence and giving my piece in regards on SBMM and why most COD players are completely wrong and misinformed and strawmanning the wrong thing for their woes. First, let us define what SBMM is, because that will determine if people are misusing the word. Well, it's pretty literal, ain't it? Skill-based matchmaking. Matchmaking that attempts to match you with players of your skill level as a priority. Oh my god, the horror. The video game makes me play against people on my skill level. This is a travesty, and I must make my entire online persona around lambasting these goddamn developers that thought that this is a good idea. Being facetious aside, there's actually more nuance to most SBMM systems in these games than being a pseudo-ranked matchmaking system that matches you with equal skill level players. You didn't buy Call of Duty to play a competitive game. You bought Call of Duty to play a power fantasy where you'd shitstomp people, or at the very least, feel like you're one of the better players in the lobby. The very existence of matchmaking that prioritizes lessened skill gaps is an antithesis to why you bought the video game. How can you be one of the better players in the lobby if the game constantly matches you with people of your skill and better? Well, you'd have an argument there if SBMM in casuals actually worked like that. But it empirically doesn't work that way at all. According to Drifter and Exclusive Ace's research, which we will be citing repeatedly, the Call of Duty SBMM in casual playlist has a high degree of variance in the players and matches you play with and against. Not only that, but Call of Duty's matchmaking prioritizes recent game performance in kill-death ratio and score per minute, meaning that unlike matchmaking that is based on true hidden elo or rating system that true competitive ranked games use, Call of Duty's matchmaking is reactive and actively being adjusted drastically based on your in-game performance recently. So here's our first problem. That is literally not skill-based matchmaking that ranked games use. What the fuck kind of ranked matchmaking rewards you for sucking dick in 1 or 2 matches by giving you way easier lobbies almost immediately? In true SBMM ranked games, like Valorant or Overwatch, you would go on massive losing or winning streaks until you reach a skill bracket where you can sustain a 50% win rate. Those games don't adjust your lobbies if you have a trash KD in a small amount of games. Those games are strictly based off of wins, and if you can somehow muster a win despite inting your cock off and going negative, then your rank will continue to rise steadily until you plateau at a 50% win rate. Not because the game forces a 50% win rate on you by tampering with your lobbies, but because 50% win rate is the ideal numerical indicator of a player at their proper skill level. COD does not have this in any way, shape, or form in their casual playlists, because players simply don't give a shit about their win rates. Looking at my stats, I think I have a 0.7 win rate because I straight up ignore the objective in team deathmatch every mode, thus resulting in quite a few more losses than wins. And the game's matchmaking gives zero fucks if I lose or not because there's zero stakes in whether or not I lose. In COD Vanguard, Ace's high performance in recent games of 2.3 KDR resulted in him playing against players with 1.18 KDR as the average KDR of his enemy team. And the enemy player's KDR past 5 games can range from as low as 0.32 to as high as 3.14. So looking at the actual data of the matchmaking in Call of Duty, it's not even remotely about providing you with a fair and close match at all, given the fact that the variance of recent game performance can range from 0.32 to 3.1 KDR. We're talking about a lobby where a guy that goes 15 kills 5 deaths average fights someone that goes 6 kills 18 deaths average. If it's a skill-based matchmaking system similar to ranked play, it has completely failed a player that goes 0.32 KDR, because the 3.1 KDR guy will completely shitstomp him almost every time. Now, of course, according to the data, there is proof that your opponent's average recent KDR will be higher if you continue to do well. His other account with intentionally tanked recent KDR of 0.7 got matched with opponents that average 0.83 recent KDR, with recent KDR variance ranging from 0.38 to 1.6 on his enemy team, showing that the game does in fact have a system that adjusts lobbies based on recent performance. However, this still does not make the system skill-based in the same sense that ranked games are skill-based, because it is still matching a 3.14 recent KDR player in the same lobby as a 0.32 KDR player, essentially turning the 0.32 KDR player into fodder, where the lobby is objectively unfair for him. Now that we have taken a look at this data, we can paint a clearer picture. Does Call of Duty's matchmaking give you a lobby filled with players that are exactly the skill level you are to make the lobby more competitive every single match? Data says a hard no. Does it make your enemy team slightly more competent based on your recent high performance? Yes, but only to a certain degree. We were talking about a higher performance player with 2.3 recent KDR fighting an enemy team that average out to 1.18, which is only 0.35 KDR higher than the enemy team in the noob lobby. While the tanked noob account has to fight opponents that are 0.13 KDR higher than him, the sweaty main account has the luxury of fighting opponents 1 entire KDR lower than him. And to add to the randomness, we have the variance observed earlier where the sweat account fought even worse enemies, since there was a 0.3 KDR opponent in one of the recorded matches. To add to the drastic variance, he also fought a difficult opponent that had a 3.1 recent KDR. So looking at this data, it seems that for the most part, matches have a good variance in skill level. Of course, if you do better, you will end up in objectively more challenging matches, but we are looking at a marginally harder lobby. As I pointed out before, the sweat account is still playing against people far below him in recent performance by over an entire point of KDR. The game forcing you to fight tooth and nail every match is simply a myth when objectively the opponent average is nowhere near 2.3 KDR, meaning these lobbies have plenty of negative KDR players for you to farm. So far, the matchmaking data has shown us that modern Call of Duty games provide games of high variance in skill level within a match. Skilled players are still in lobbies where they are definitely better than the average players within that lobby, and low skill players still have to play in lobbies where they are definitively the worst player in that lobby, with most of the players in the lobby boasting higher performing KDR. So far, we've debunked quite a few misinterpretations of what SBMM does. Does it match you only against opponents of equal skill? No, but if you do well, it will cause the average opponent to be slightly better, and depending on how good you are, the average skill level of your opponent will still be bounds below you. Is every match a neck-and-neck esports lobby? No. The very concept of recent performance matchmaking based on KDR makes it impossible for games to be truly even, especially with a high degree of skill variance of each player in one lobby. Does the matchmaking force you into a 1 KDR? No, but this style of matchmaking will cause the average to trend closer to a 1 KDR on average, because it's designed to eliminate extreme outliers in matchmaking and reduce absolute stomp fests. So to begin with, the term SBMM is highly inaccurate and paints a false narrative about how matchmaking works for Call of Duty. It implies that the matchmaking is heavily based on skill, and it increases parity of skill level for a highly competitive match akin to ranked games. But as we've discussed ad nauseum, COD's matchmaking factually does not do that. That is why people have come up with the new terms like engagement optimized matchmaking, EOMM, because it's factually not based on overall player skill at all, but recent performance. So I would probably instead call it RPMM because it's far more accurate of a name. Recent performance matchmaking. Look, I get it. You play Call of Duty because it's a power fantasy. Getting kill streaks is fun. Stomping on lobbies is fun. And entering flow state and going beast mode and not dying is fun. Gone are the days where you can find a dog shit lobby and farm the shit out of a group of noobs for an entire afternoon, then quit the session feeling good about how good you are at the game. I've been there. When I used to play the older CODs like the first MW3 and Black Ops 2, my first 2 COD games, I would find some of these lower skill lobbies and just shit stomp them over and over, going like 34 repeatedly. But here's the thing, the so-called heydays of COD was over 10 years ago. The whole concept of a modern military shooter was still new. It had existed for maybe about 5 years at that point, with COD 4 being one of the first massive hits in the genre when it came out in 2007. Right now, it's 2024, a whopping 14 years since Call of Duty became the most popular shooter on the planet. Do you think all the noobs that played back then are still noobs? Do you think there hasn't been 14 years of tutorials, guides, in-depth, and information to up the general skill level of your average COD gamer? I think we can safely assume that with Call of Duty being such a tenured staple in the gaming industry, the skill floor of most players have increased to a point where it would be much harder to run into a lobby of thumbless gamers like back in the day. And while we're talking about low skill lobbies, let's take a look at the reverse boosting argument. One major argument against RPMM is that it's abusable, that you can forcibly perform poorly to get into easier lobbies. Well, you just made those games much more enjoyable for the enemy team by becoming a feeder, so thanks for taking one for the team. And so what if you get one insane pop-off game? Your KDR will get evened out with your shitty feeding matches, and you have to waste time not playing the game for one pop-off match. So from a practical standpoint, most people can't afford to waste several matches just inting for an easy lobby. Here's another interesting fact regarding reverse boosting. Did you know that most people who do it use a low skill account to form a lobby of low skill players, then use the second account to join the lobby, thus bypassing the normal matchmaking? So basically, there's low lives out there buying a second copy of the game, running the game on another machine, spending hours destroying that account's performance, and using it to join low skill lobbies, then using their main to join before the lobby is full to stop low skill lobbies. Some people are saying that this abuse makes the COD matchmaking pointless and that it might as well be removed. I don't know about you, but a system that can only be broken temporarily by someone wasting hours ruining their account stats seems pretty effective. And the concept of smurfing has plagued PvP games ever since its inception anyways. Most of the time, it's content creators doing this because they need to get nukes for their gameplay, or else they look like trash players. There's actual video proof of people admitting this, and plenty of them do it behind the scenes for their content.
I think anything a viewer could ask for is for the content creator to be transparent, or as transparent as they can, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. Yes, I have reverse boosted in multiplayer. Back when I was uploading multiplayer about 8 months ago, there were times where I decided to work the matchmaking towards my favor. Not particularly by tanking my stats, but rather joining on a bot account. I think anybody that has watched me play 6v6 Modern Warfare could clearly see that. I think with matchmaking being as strict as it is, there's just no way that content could have been pushed out at the rate at which it was pushed out, like in Infinite Warfare or World War II.
So it totally makes sense for these same people to vocally complain about the matchmaking system, because it makes their job so much harder when the game's matchmaking is no longer a lottery of lobbies, where you quit the match over and over until you find a lobby filled with low skill players. And yes, they do this. This is the modus operandi of COD content creators back in the day. They would quit any lobby that looked competitive to find weaker lobbies to stomp for gameplay footage. In fact, picking and choosing low skill lobbies is probably one of the most destructive and unsustainable matchmaking models around, and I'm honestly glad it got taken out. It encourages rampant rage quitting and a culture of leaving lobbies the moment things turn south. It lets you be a complete shitter player, and it tricks you into thinking you are better than you are by inflating your KDR and playing exclusively in low skill lobbies, which then likely leads to the players you're stomping to start ditching these unfun lobbies or even outright quit the game. One more thing that needs to be addressed is the uneducated and borderline grifting that the community leaders tend to do regarding complaining about the boogeyman of SBMM. There's been so much sensationalist, reactionary, anecdotal, clickbait content in regards to this topic that is genuinely frustrating. Almost none of these influencers have put in the same amount of research and testing that Exclusive Ace and Drifter did. Yet they have a bigger fan base and platform, and all their fans listen to the bullshit that is being peddled out of their mouths. And the discussion then becomes permanently plagued with misinformation that permeates throughout the entire COD community and even to other games like Apex, which is also suffering from this stupid SBMM discussion. The discussion surrounding COD matchmaking has gotten so low IQ, people are making videos about skill-based hit reg, intentionally giving high-skill players poor connections, skill-based aim assist tampering, lobbies with bots, skill-based fucking fog, etc. My brother in Christ, you guys are listening to the COD equivalent of Alex Jones. Skill-based matchmaking discussion is about as intelligent and productive as talking about pizza restaurants being secret child trafficking rings at this point. And too many content creators would rather fall into the emotional appeal end than to be intelligent and spend time on research and data collection. And people falling for their misinformation are basically lining their pockets with cash. If they can't easily make videos of nukes, I guess it's easier for them to make videos complaining about SBMM. They still make money either way. People are quick to scapegoat the current form of matchmaking for all their gameplay woes, but in reality, there is a reason that almost every PvP game utilizes some degree of SBMM, and it has proven benefits that help in maintaining a healthier, longer-lasting player base. The matchmaking currently employed in Call of Duty games does a great job at trimming the two extreme ends of lobby skill gap and improves the grand scheme of match quality. The term engagement-based matchmaking is definitely a more accurate description, but why are people mad that the game wants players to be engaged? Why would they remove a system that keeps the most amount of players playing for a longer amount of time? Just so the jaded and bitter vets can stroke their EP and brag about how good they are at COD again, and flex their KDR as if their KDR from old games weren't from abusing a busted and exploitable matchmaking system? Here's an extremely common scenario in older Call of Duties with less than SBMM. You queue into a match, your team is significantly better than the other team. The other team can barely leave spawn. The enemy team is basically perma-dying while your team's top 2 players are farming the shit out of them. You end up running around the map chasing the stray 1 to 2 guys that are spawning away from your team's top 2 players. You end the game going 6-1. Most of the enemy team players are going 2-14. Now, was that a good game? 10 minutes of gameplay where you got 6 kills because you managed to join a game against noobs and new players. And your team's top 2 guys had a ball farming the shit out of them. But what about you and the rest of your team? What about the entire enemy team that couldn't do shit? The lack of proper matchmaking just resulted in a match where it was boring for 10 out of the 12 players in the lobby. This is when we have to recognize that Call of Duty match quality is an extremely fickle and difficult thing to manage. Call of Duty in a lot of ways is not a zero-sum game. Everyone wants to be the one streaking up, but no one wants to get farmed. For every pop-off game to happen, there must be an enemy team that is struggling. It's probably accurate to say that most players are willing to play a couple of mediocre to bad games if they can get 1 to 2 pop-off games to round out the night. Well, guess what? The current RPMM system is built exactly for that. You can't farm the same low-skill lobby over and over. But most players in most skill brackets will have a smoother, more evened out game session, where they get a reasonable amount of bad, middling, and great games. The current system is, in a lot of ways, pretty genius when it comes to matchmaking for Call of Duty. A win rate based system wouldn't work, because then that'd be a true skill based system. And like stated before, COD players rarely care about wins or losses anyways, and it's possible for a player to win many matches but still consider those matches low quality if they go negative in KDR. However, a recent performance-based matchmaking can work because it still allows for a high degree of variance and skill level as stated before, while creating some semblance of team balance. Whether you like it or not, team balance can tremendously affect the enjoyability of a COD match, and there has to be some algorithm interference to ensure a higher average of quality lobbies. Like my aforementioned example, having too many good players on your team can actually detract from the enjoyability of the match, because they'd be wiping the enemy team over and over, leaving you with less than a kill per minute. You got a win and a nice KDR out of that match, but it wasn't interesting, competitive, or even fun to run in the circle chasing after scraps. Guess what? The current RPMM system accounts for that and makes sure there's not that many sweats on your team as well, since it keeps the team average in mind. So if you're a pretty decent player, you will drag down the skill level of your teammates, giving you a better chance to farm the enemy team, allowing you a chance to be the top dog of your team and have a chance to streak up, because as we've seen with Ace's data, the matchmaking system still gravitate towards lobbies in the 1 KDR average, whether you were above or below that. Yes, if you do well for a few games, you will eventually get knocked down a few pegs in some matches. That is an inevitability with this system. But if you have a few unfortunate games on some bad maps or got unlucky, the system helps you and gives you matches where you will have a better chance to do well. In the old system, your matchmaking would be a complete lottery with some SBMM influences, since the devs have come out and stated that it has always existed. And not only is it a lottery, it is a lottery where you can manipulate the results if you are unsatisfied with the outcome, at the detriment of others who decided to stay in the lobby. So if you are a scumbag rage quitter that leaves every lobby you dislike, modern matchmaking definitely hurts you. To the average player who prefers to let matchmaking do its work instead of doing rampant lobby hopping, on average the modern matchmaking is leaps and bounds better because it completely removes this lobby hopping culture and does its best to find a match that the algorithm deems to be the most engaging for the most amount of players. You will still have rage quitters, but the rage quitters won't be rewarded with easier lobbies that they've curated after rage quitting unfavorable lobbies over and over. Matchmaking is simply more balanced and quality when everyone has to abide by the rules, instead of allowing scumbags to pick and choose lobbies at the detriment of everyone in the game he left and in the game he's joining. I do sort of understand the complaints about being unable to use wacky loadouts in some lobbies, making it impossible to farm camos. Most people are usually using top tier weapons, so using a level 1 gun or something extremely non-meta will make you struggle tremendously, and this is the argument that someone like Scum brings up often. This notion that I'm trying to chill and farm camos, but these lobbies are too hard.
Can you attest to it too? Skill base this year feels way worse than any other year. And then people come in and they're like, why are you bitching? You're a pro player. You should be able to kill anybody. And it's like, dude, I am using a Sidewinder going for fucking camos, getting slide canceled by MCWs and Rival 9s the whole game.
This is a legitimate complaint because COD has always been built on this culture where you are encouraged to level up guns or do weird challenges or experiment with weird gun builds. And playing like that can definitely be extremely challenging and unviable if you perform well using normal guns, then suddenly swap to a garbage loadout for lulz. For what it's worth, if you are willing to tank a few games on your garbage loadout, the matchmaking will account for your worsened performance and give you lobbies where you can do better, which is one of the benefits of a dynamic matchmaking that accounts for recent performance. And let's be honest with ourselves, if you use a garbage gun in OG MW3 for fun, like the M16, you are probably going to have an AC-130 dropped on you by the droves of sweats abusing the ACR. I don't think it's the game's fault necessarily for having a hard time matchmaking someone, sweating his balls off, and gimping himself by going pistol only the next game. And the only reason people preferred the old matchmaking for farming camos is due to the player's ability to lobby hop till they can find a lobby that they can do well in with suboptimal loadouts. And if you really cared about the camo grind or leveling weapons, hardcore has always been the best option, and with the advent of crossbow progression in MW3, you were also given the option of farming weapon XP in zombies, which is excellent since using naked guns have been historically painful no matter what game you played in the past. Another legitimate complaint that I do understand is playing with friends. SBMM prioritizes the overall experience of the lobby over the experience of one outlier lower skilled player. So it's willing to make the game unenjoyable for the low skilled friend by matching into the higher skilled friend's lobby. Rather than having an entire lobby of lower skilled players be ruined by a higher skilled friend, I do think the matchmaking should be slightly looser when queuing up in groups. There is risk of reverse boosting being too easy using this method, but pre-mates have always been problematic for any matchmaking. I'd rather have the algorithm matchmake in a way that allows a low skilled player to have fun than to punish him for playing with a friend. There are a lot of different tweaks that can be done, but I will accept that this is one big flaw with the COD matchmaking. But there's also not an easy solution considering how abusable it is if you can intentionally queue into low performance lobbies as a higher skill player. For what it's worth, anecdotally, there has been tons of chatter about how queuing with friends actually makes the matchmaking easier and vice versa, so this argument is a bit of a toss-up and hard to quantify. Another popular complaint is that connection should be king and it should bypass every other aspect of matchmaking, which sounds like a strong argument on paper. Matchmaking should not prioritize competitive lobbies if it makes the match laggy. Well, looking at Ace's data, his bot account average is 73 milliseconds in game, and his higher skill main is 86. I'm sorry, but are you seriously petitioning to scrap an entire matchmaking system because you want 13 less ping in your games? You'd have a point if the lobbies are consistently like 30 ping wars, but 13 ping? You can make the argument that they shouldn't have worsened the ping, but 13 is genuinely negligible and shouldn't affect your gameplay whatsoever. Honestly, I think people should ask themselves this question. Do you have fun with modern Call of Duty, and are you actually good at the game? Year after year, they are blaming something for them sucking ass. Oh, it's lag compensation back in Blops 2. Oh, it's boost jumping being a shitty mechanic in the jetpacking era of Call of Duty. Oh, it's operator abilities being cheap free kills in Blops 3 to 4 era. Oh, it's aim assist being cranked to hell. And now we're blaming SBMM when the COD players have been given everything they've wanted with another era of boring boots on the ground modern warfare games. Bringing back nostalgia for these players and reminding them of times when they used to be good at this series. When are we going to realize that Call of Duty is just an extremely low skill floor game where most players can plug in a controller and beam the shit out of any veteran that they see with aim assist? When will COD players realize that maybe they are genuinely just not that good, or that their middling Call of Duty skill level won't let them be successful in every Call of Duty title? Maybe it's time for Call of Duty fans to take a look in the mirror and think about why they keep wasting money on a game series that they keep complaining about. This SBMM discourse, for the most part, is just frustrating and sad and hypocritical. This notion of being stomped and having to sweat isn't fun, and algorithm is ruining my games. It's so moronic because you're basically asking for COD to implement matchmaking that removes players that are better than you since you don't like being stomped. And hell, you don't even like playing versus players on your own skill level because it's too competitive and fair. So you are basically only satisfied when everyone else is worse than you, because only then are you able to feel like you are getting better at the game. Being able to outpeak a sweaty sniper isn't proof of improvement. Perfecting quickscopes versus sweats isn't an improvement. Using mobility to outplay people isn't an improvement. The only improvement is seeing your KDR go up and up, because the only indication of improving at COD is how good you are at farming bot tier lobbies without dying. These bad players don't even care that they're bad, just let them get stomped and they won't even complain. They won't complain, huh? Boy, these comment sections sure are filled to the brim with complaints of people blaming SBMM for being stomped. You think the noobs being stomped aren't complaining about SBMM matching them into hard lobbies, the same way you are complaining about sweats when you get stomped? Let's be real here and look at your match history. If you are above average, you should have some really nice games, and even if SBMM kicks in, you should be going even or at least close to a 1 KDR. There should be enough variance in your games to make most sessions have an even balance of stomping, competitive, and tough games. Hell, it's literally statistically proven that you can get significantly better than your opponent, and the game won't match you with an average of higher than 1.24 KDR as we've seen earlier with the statistics. Ultimately, the point of this video was just to vent and a futile attempt to push back against the popular narrative. It's okay to dislike SBMM. It's not a perfect system, and no matchmaking system will ever be perfect, especially when balancing a fair lobby versus a fun lobby. I think Call of Duty's current matchmaking does a good job of giving you a varied experience for the most part. What I don't think is okay is blaming the matchmaking for your in-game difficulties. I personally am a big fan of blaming game design, maps, weapon balance, etc. because these are things that I can actively work to overcome and see improvement. And if it doesn't click with me after a while, I can just say that the game wasn't vibing with me and I can move on like I did with Modern Warfare 2019 or Warzone, since it took COD to a really bizarre direction. Blaming SBMM is borderline delusional, because you are basically saying the game is great and you love it, but you wish the online PvP had an easy mode so you don't have to try too hard after having to work a 9 to 5. My friend, it's okay. You aren't a high schooler grinding Call of Duty for 6 hours a day. You have a job, a family, real life obligations, etc. It's okay to not be good enough to drop nukes in Call of Duty. If you don't have fun because you think the matchmaking makes it too competitive, then maybe you should just play a single player game because you aren't going to find a more casual shooter experience in Call of Duty. It's so fucking wild to me that we have really reached a point where people are complaining that Call of Duty is too competitive. I'm genuinely baffled. Like, brother in Christ, please stop buying Call of Duty games. They won't change a thing unless you boycott them and they see a decrease in revenue, because Call of Duty games are nothing but money printers milking stupid people that buy a product they don't like because they got a goddamn stranglehold on the arcade FPS experience. Stop wishing that the next Call of Duty will go back to the good old days and that the next one will finally be the perfect Call of Duty. Call of Duty is what Call of Duty is. You will always find an excuse for why you suck, and you will always buy the next one. The content creators will make hours of content shitting on these games, but at the end of the day, they are still groveling at the feet of Activision, buying game after game when anyone with principle or integrity would have moved on and played another game. God, the Call of Duty community is pathetic. As much as people hate Overwatch, at least the content creators have the balls to quit and move to Fortnite or Valorant or Apex. Oh wait, those are competitive games that require you to actually be good at them instead of creating a culture where farming noobs is seen as impressive. So tired of you goddamn COD players, man, I swear to God.